Cheers. Thank you. Great to see a busy audience tonight. I'm just going to rattle through a project I've been doing for 8 years, and then I'm going to show a short film afterwards, which is about 10 minutes. Just bear with me while I rescue with this pesky PC. I'm just not used to it at all. Here we go. And then, there we go, perfect. And then I just need full screen. PCs, bloody nightmare. So for the past 8 years, I've been kind of doing a self-funded, self-promoted documentary project on Glasgow's Renaissance. I call it the Renaissance. It's not my term. It was a term that came from the City Council, 2006, when Glasgow embarks on yet another regeneration of the city. I think what's important from this quote is this idea of, looking to the future and not repeating the same mistakes of the past. So the Renaissance as a term is a positive term. It's about rebirth, and anybody who's from Glasgow, and I'm from Glasgow, and I'm from the East End, and we all want the city to be regenerated. We all cry out for it. But the city seems to be in this constant reflux, constant change, constant. Every 30 years or so we go through the same process. I started this project, first of all, in Kilmarnock. This project was started as a result of I was doing a Masters in documentary photography, and living in Brisbane at the time, and when Glasgow was, the East End was announced, Commonwealth Games, it was going to be utopia, it was going to be fantastic, and I thought, what a great place to start this project and to start documenting, but there was nothing really happening in Kilmarnock for a long time. This was Kilmarnock in 2014, so this was a transition. This is where we got to, and this was during the games, and obviously the village is opened and everything's great. So I'm just going to go back again to the Kilmarnock of 2008, and this is where I started photographing Kilmarnock. Kilmarnock went from a population of about 45,000, 50,000 to about 3,000. There was nothing much left of the community. There was nothing much left there. So it was very easy to come in with a kind of utopian idea and to promise, complete transformation in the area when A, there's not a lot of people left there, and B, there's nothing there anyway. So you would be thankful for anything. You'd be thankful for a Tesco's. You'd be thankful for any kind of investment. And at the time as well, I started the project talking to a lot of the youth in Kilmarnock, because what I found was quite interesting is that in a lot of the local press and a lot of and even the national press, there was a big talk about all the apprenticeships in Kilmarnock. This was all going to local lads and lassies, all these apprenticeships. They were going to build, they were going to be the bricklayers, they were going to be the electricians. And that was all fantastic, but it seemed to be that there was a certain limit of expectation about what jobs these kids were going to get. Because if the Commonwealth Games are coming to the West End of the city, and all the parents in the West End were told their kids were all going to have apprenticeships, they would be up in arms. But the point is that there was nothing else in Kilmarnock there, and you can have this certain kind of level. So I started documenting Kilmarnock and looking, but nothing happened. And I think this is a problem when you promise all this utopia, is nothing happened for a long time in Kilmarnock. None of the building work started. And I started photographing Arden Street, which was a lovely sandstone tenement kind of block of flats that had been emptied for about 5 years. And I was photographing which I thought was empty buildings until, on the bottom right-hand corner you can see there's a sign of life there. And this was Margaret Giaconelli, who I ended up documenting for about 3 years. And basically Margaret's story, for those that don't know, Margaret purchased her house, and she, unlike everybody else, wasn't eligible to be rehoused, and she sat and waited until she got a fair price for her property. And obviously with the Commonwealth Games coming, she presumed, because the land in Kilmarnock was then worth a fortune, everybody made a fortune, the Church of Scotland made a fortune, anybody who had 10 centimetres of land in Kilmarnock sold it. So she sat and waited, and the district evaluation, what she was offered for her home was £29,000, and she refused that. And then there was a long kind of battle ensued. And I spent a lot of time with Kilmarnock, and I think Margaret's story's interesting because she kind of, she represented what Kilmarnock was, and she ended up somebody who was kind of demonised by her own community as well, because nobody could stop this coming to Kilmarnock, and we had people like Mr Redmond, who was a local councillor area, saying, somebody had to take it in the chin here, you can't stop this progress. And I don't think Margaret or anyone else who questioned what development was happening to Kilmarnock was wanting to stop the games. We all knew the East End had to be regenerated, we all wanted change, but there was just something not quite right, and there's something, a wee message here. Battery power, I'm looking to ITs to see if they've got a wee plug. I'll just keep going through it. So basically, just to carry on with Margaret's story, the house went into lockdown, and it was a media circus for a week, and where she and her husband Jack and some of the family stayed in the house, and there was a lot of tension there. There was a lot of media, and ultimately Margaret was evicted from her house, and once she lost her house, that was it. There was no going back. You get the power supply, good man. I'll take a wee. Thank you. I don't even know if I've knocked it out or anything. But sorry. Get Viv back up, tell some jokes. I'm only joking. Won't be a second. I'll just kind of carry on, and hopefully we'll not get cut off. Basically, after Kilmarnock, then I realised that the whole city was changing. There was so many other areas in the city. When you start to look around and you start to see a lot of derelict housing schemes, that there was so much more that needed to be documented. This was the Oaklands, which is now gone completely. This is where the M74 kind of ring road system is feeding it now. And are we all right? Yeah, perfect. Basically, this was the disappearance of an entire community. No one lived in the Oaklands here, and it was the idea of what I do as well. As I should have said from the outset, is what I try and do is I try and track down current and former residents who lived in these areas to rebuild the stories. This is not me sitting on Google and putting nice photographs together. The residents and people who lived there are key to this, because I never lived there. And this was an idea then of putting together short films and presentations to try and rebuild what the Oaklands was before, and what it was as a community and things that were going on there. And obviously, people who I spoke to, there's a lot of people from the Oaklands have been rehoused, and there's a new estate going there. There's a private-public partnership, so there was a lot of private houses, there was a lot of social houses, and everybody was being rehoused. And people who I spoke to, and this is a guy, Tony, who, he wasn't criticising his new home at all. He loved his new home. It had all the mod cons. It was a fantastic place. But what had happened was there was no community. He just felt completely isolated. And when you look at where he lives, yeah, he's got a fantastic house, but he's also got a dual carriageway running right the way through. And there's no shops and there's no local amenities. And he just felt, his story was, where did everybody go? And I think there's this question of, again, which Glasgow's, saying it's learning from the mistakes of the past, it's just dispersing whole communities across the city. And new housing's great, but what else are you going to put in with this new housing? So, into the high-rise. What then I started documenting was there's a lot of high-rise blocks to be demolished, and this was the main part of the kind of project that the City Council had embarked on. It was the high-rise living was condemned, I think, in many ways, and it's like, we've lost, after Red Road, we've now lost about 30% of all high-rise flats since 2006, and I just thought that's a massive kind of shift, and that's a massive failure as well. So it was the idea of looking at these high-rise flats. And, speaking to people who used to live in there, putting together a story and ultimately trying to find out what was the turning point and why high-rise living, why they thought high-rise living had been demonised in certain parts of the city. And it was speaking to people who were either about to leave or who had been rehoused. And the biggest project that I then documented was Sight Hill. And, Sight Hill, there's only 2 blocks left in Sight Hill now. Sight Hill's been going through this demolition process since 2008, when they first started being demolished. But in 2005, those buildings were declared not fit for purpose anymore. But they kind of waited for a long time. There was a kind of possible salvation of the Youth Olympics that Glasgow bidded for, with the idea that this would be another athletes' village that Sight Hill would go for, and this would be the transformation that Sight Hill would be. So again, we're relying on a mega sporting event to come in to solve the problems. inner city, going back to Dalmarnock, you know, and crucially again about Dalmarnock is that there's no proof anywhere that a mega sporting event is going to benefit the local population, there's nothing that states that. And I think again, you know, we say how these buildings left in limbo, there's still people being housed in them. They're tearing down other ones saying they're not fit for purpose, but we'll put you in some new heating and a wee bit of insulation, and it's not, it's the whole building, the whole area is then condemned. And I think it was been very difficult for the people who I spoke to, who were being shifted from flat to flat and being told that their house isn't fit for purpose and being demolished, but then being rehoused in exactly the same kind of type of flat in the same area with the same social conditions and the same conditions of the block. The idea as well with Sighthill was that it was one of these regeneration areas, but if we didn't kind of push for the Youth Olympics, it was the idea that they would have to wait to 2032 before any work could start. Now, we didn't get that, but the work has started and things have happened. But it's a very, very long process. And it was a long time there where there was no money to do this. And people are just being left in limbo. Nobody knows what's going on. No one knows what's going on. So again, it was spending a lot of time within these blocks, and the idea that I got access to these empty blocks and taking a lot of these kind of nice artistic pictures, but they were a wee bit boring and mundane if I didn't get to speak to residents. And half I would say about 3/4 of this project is going around and speaking to people and interviewing people and spending that time to kind of rebuild the high-rise flat in the areas themselves. So. Just check my time. I've got a timer on here. Oh, I'm doing all right. I'm whizzing through. Red Road, my God, Red Road last weekend it's pretty epic. I've been documenting Red Road for a long time. Kind of similar with Sighthill. I mean, this was once home to 4,500 people. And when I started documenting it in the work I was doing, I was kind of, myself and a few other artists and photographers and people, there was a cultural project there to kind of to document high-rise living. And it was by GHA and Glasgow Life, and it was a big project. And basically, it was marking the end of high-rise living in Glasgow, with the idea that that box has been ticked, and now I think we can carry on with the process. But it felt very odd to me to work in a project that was really about a massive failure. But being a starving artist and kids to feed, I put my hand out and done some of the work. But fundamentally, I always had that question about why this project was going on, why there was so much, interest in it, so much investment. And it was this idea of ticking that box about Red Road. And this project finished in 2012, And it was also the idea that Red Road had gone, and Red Road hadn't gone, it was still there. It was still there right up to the bitter end. And in many ways it's still there, but that's another era. So, again, empty blocks of flats, a lot of time in these flats, but the idea of kind of rebuilding, going in reverse and speaking to people. And of course all the residents had kind of moved away from Red Road, who'd initially lived there. What you were left with this kind of transient population of asylum seekers and refugees. Now these were the last people to leave those blocks. And compared to the first people who moved in, Red Road, you've got to remember, was like anywhere high-rise living in Glasgow after the slum clearances. This was utopia. This was, underfloor heating that nobody could switch on, but it didn't matter. This was double glazing. This was an inside bathroom. This was mixer taps. This was huge. And to compare it to the kind of last people who were living in that, these people were, the buildings themselves, everybody knew there was demolition was pending. The last block there was only emptied in April, March this year, before the demolition. Now they've had to live in that site for so many years. The building itself was disintegrating. Nobody's going to do any repairs on the building that's falling apart. Nobody wanted them. Now this is before the kind of Syria, kind of latest news and the photographs of the dead children and things like that. No one in Glasgow had any time at all to house asylum seekers. Now what was going to happen is this block was going to be emptied, and they were going to house them all in a former industrial estate in Balmore Road, old Scottish Water's old office. And then people in the area said we don't want asylum seekers coming. That was cancelled. And this was all part of the process of why Red Road took so long to empty as well. And it just, to me, it was just a real sad existence. For the first people that moved in there to the last residents was a real kind of picture of Glasgow in the past 40 years and the way we treat people. And there was guys like Jamal who I documented who lived alone in one block for 8 months by himself. He was destitute, which meant he was he could be thrown out of the country at any point, and he knew if he left his flat he would have to leave the country. So he sat there for 8 months while demolition work was going on around his flat. He had his own lift shaft, the workers had their own lift shaft. It was just absolutely bonkers that this was going on in Glasgow, and this guy had to live there for 8 months. Very quickly, again, it's the idea of, it's a long time to get these stories, and it's a long time speaking to people, and it was the idea of trying to document Red Road in another way. And we found out about this underground shopping complex, we thought it was. And it turned out it was a bingo hall. And it was an underground bingo hall for up to like 800 people. It was a mecca bingo hall. Someone here might have went to it, because there's people from all over the city, apparently. It closed in the 1990s. And next door to that was a big bar. There was this underground, bar. And it was the idea again of the bar, the bingo, the bookies, was the kind of social amenities for 4,500 people, so you can kind of question, what's wrong with high-rise living and what's wrong with planning. And then, this was Red Road, just the day before it kind of went last week. And I spent a lot of time photographing the demolitions, and I think, this is one of my favourite photographs, because it was the idea of photographing the people actually watching the demolition, because everybody gets the same pictures of demolition. And I think it's really because it's the people in the north of the city who have had to live with that eyesore for a long time and live with this idea of what's going to happen. And there's still no plans for what's going to happen on that site. There's still nothing, And there's also this thing in Glasgow, but the land's got to lie and land's got to settle. That's all bullshit. That's just because nobody knows what's going on. Tesco aren't building anymore either, so I don't know. We can't even get a Tesco's, Very quickly, just moving on. This is the project, my last project I'll show you a film about. Again, it was the idea of, I do freelance now, all this stuff's all done by myself, and I approach Glasgow museums and different organisations, because these flats here in the East End, the Whiteville and the Blueville flats, were coming down, and I thought, well, maybe there's a project, maybe there's money there, maybe there's something to document it, somebody would be interested. Nobody was interested, no one cared about it at all. So I embarked on this project myself to document it. And these were, pretty kind of brutalist structures, but as you'll see from the film, it's fine for architects and photographers to say that, because they were a nightmare to live in. And it was the idea of, again, it's questioning the last residents in these flats, of what was that turning point? What happened to make these flats a happy place to live, to being synonymous with drugs, crime, nightmare, And I live in these, and every day they just become an eyesore. And the idea is, you take them away, you cut them down, knock them down, blow them down, and everything's better. And just very quickly on the idea of working with residents, is the idea of resident stories make this project for me. And if I can archive pictures from people who I speak to, and this is a family, and this is the balcony, like 25 years later, and you can see how everything's changed in the background. You can just see the kind of forged steel mill, things like that. So it was empty balconies, but it was a former kind of side of life. Oh, that's my timer, I'll tap to stop it. And and again, family pictures just emphasise that there was life there. It was once a nice place to live. And people lived there, and people managed to bring up kids there. And it was kind of unfair that they were then demonised as a whole, because there was lots of nice people that lived in there, but they just kind of hid themselves away. I'll just now show you a quick